At 62, I believed my life's work was secure, a legacy for my children. But my daughter Clara and her fiancé, Julian, saw only a piggy bank. They lured me to a dinner, then unveiled power of attorney documents, threatening to cut me off from my unborn grandchild if I refused to sign away my entire life's fortune. They thought they had me trapped, but I was about to show them that some grandmothers don't just wilt. They fight back with fire. Before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe while you're listening. And let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, take a breath and listen closely. This is my story. The burgundy dress hung in my closet like a ghost of better times. A silent witness to a betrayal that was only just beginning. I'd worn it to Clara's high school graduation, then to her college commencement, and later to celebrate her first promotion. Each time she'd complimented how elegant I looked, how proud she was to have me as her mother. Now, 3 weeks had passed since our explosive argument. $75,000. That's what Clara and her fiancé Julian had demanded I contribute for their wedding. Not asked, demanded. As if Harold's life insurance, the nest egg for my retirement, was their birthright. "Mum, you're being selfish," she'd accused, her voice sharp as winter wind. "You're sitting on all that money while we're trying to start our life. Don't you want me to be happy?" I'd offered $20,000, a generous sum. But Clara had looked at me with such contempt, such calculation, I barely recognized the little girl who'd brought me dandelions, calling them sunshine flowers. The phone call came on a Tuesday, as I tended my garden. Clara's voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. "Mum, I've been thinking, maybe we've both been too stubborn. Could we talk over dinner? I want to work this out." My heart lifted. Perhaps the silence, or her pregnancy, 3 months along, barely showing, had awakened something. "I'd like that, sweetheart," I'd said, already planning our reunion. "Actually, Julian and I thought we'd take you out, to the old mill." Harold had taken me there for our 25th anniversary. That place held memories, tears hidden by soft light. Hope stirred as I applied lipstick. Maybe family still meant more than extravagant parties. The drive was a journey through my past. The elementary school, the park swings, the community centre where I taught her to waltz, each landmark, a page in a book I wasn't sure I wanted to close. The old mill waited, warm and familiar, lit by candles visible through gauze. Punctual, as Clara taught me to be, I walked in at 6:30. The hostess led me to a corner table. Clara was already there, radiant, her skin glowing, dark hair flowing. She wore a designer dress, likely more than 2 months of my groceries. "Mum?" She rose, embracing me. I breathed in her familiar perfume, a surge of maternal love washing over me. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." I meant it. She was still my daughter. "How are you feeling? Any morning sickness?" "Better now. Second trimester is easier." She touched her belly, a gesture both protective and possessive. "Julian should be here any minute." Held up at the office. Julian Albright, ambitious, charming, confident. He dismissed anyone less successful. I'd tried to like him, tried to see what Clara saw beyond his expensive suits. "I'm glad you called," I said, settling in. "I've missed you." Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt? Regret? Before I could decipher it, Julian arrived. Not alone. 3 men in dark suits, briefcases in hand, followed him. "Mrs. Vance," Julian said, his smile too bright. "Thank you for joining us." The men took seats, turning our intimate dinner into a cold business meeting. My stomach tightened. This was planned. "Clara," I said carefully, "who are these gentlemen?" "Mum, these are some colleagues of Julian's." Her voice was steady, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "They have some paperwork they'd like you to look at." One man, silver-haired with a predatory smile, leaned forward. "Mrs. Vance, I'm Mr. Albright, Julian's attorney. We've prepared some documents that will be beneficial for everyone." The words hung heavy. That familiar tightness in my chest returned, colder this time. It had been building for weeks. What kind of documents? I asked, knowing the answer. Julian cleared his throat. It's simple, Mrs. Vance. We're asking you to sign a power of attorney. Given your age and living alone, it makes sense for someone younger to manage your investments, your property decisions. My age? I repeated quietly. I'm 62, Julian, not 92. Of course, he said, patronizing. But these things are complex, not something you should worry about. I looked at Clara, waiting for her to intervene. She sat silent, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table. The attorney slid a manila folder across. If you could just sign here and initial there, we can square everything away tonight. I opened the folder. It was exactly as I feared. Power of attorney documents. They'd give Julian and Clara control over my bank accounts, my house, my insurance policies, everything Harold and I had built. And if I don't sign? My voice was steady, despite the internal earthquake. Clara finally met my gaze. Her eyes were cold, calculating, final. Then you won't see your grandson grow up, she said simply. It's your choice, Mom. Julian and I have spoken to a lawyer about grandparents' rights. They're quite limited, especially when the grandparent is difficult. The restaurant faded. Jazz, clinking glasses, murmuring diners, all white noise. I stared at this stranger, this woman I'd raised, trying to understand when she'd changed. I see, I said quietly. My fingers found my phone, scrolling to Robert's number. Mom? Clara's voice held a note of uncertainty. What are you doing? I pressed call. Hello, Robert. It's Mom. I need you to come to the old mill on Elm Street now. Yes, I know it's late. Just come. I ended the call, placing the phone beside the folder. I think, I said, looking at Clara, that before I sign anything, someone else wants to say a few words. Silence stretched, taut. Julian shifted, his composure cracking. The lawyers exchanged quick, predatory glances. Mom? Clara wheedled. No need to involve Robert. This is between us, is it? My hands were steady in my lap. Because bringing 3 lawyers to a reconciliation dinner suggests you've already involved quite a few people. Mr. Albright cleared his throat. Mrs. Vance, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Family matters can be emotional. Can they? I met his gaze directly. How thoughtful of you to notice. 23 minutes. That's how long Robert would take. 23 minutes to navigate this minefield. Julian leaned forward, his salesman smile back. Look, Mrs. Vance. Clara. May I call you Clara? We're going to be family soon. You may call me Mrs. Vance. His smile faltered. Of course, Mrs. Vance. There's a misunderstanding. We're not trying to take anything. Just help manage your assets more efficiently. I see. How much would this help cost? Your fee? The lawyers stirred. Julian's jaw tightened. Administrative costs, naturally. This is about family, about Clara and the baby's security. The baby? I turned to Clara, who studied her nails. When did you plan this? Before or after you called me about reconciliation? She lifted her chin. Harold's stubborn streak twisted. Does it matter? It matters to me. Fine. The word was brittle. We've been discussing options for weeks. Ever since you made it clear you don't care about my happiness. Options. The word tasted bitter. Is that what we're calling extortion now? It's not extortion. Clara's voice rose. It's family. What families do for each other. What families do, I said quietly, is support each other without lawyers and ultimatums. A young, nervous lawyer leaned in. Mrs. Vance, grandparents' rights are limited. If your daughter restricts access, your legal recourse would be... Excuse me. Robert stood behind me, still in his hospital scrubs. 37, my son had Harold's steady presence, his grandmother's sharp eyes. I'm Dr. Vance, he said. I believe you called me, Mum. I did. I gestured to a chair. Robert, meet your sister's colleagues. He swept the table, taking in the lawyers, the folder, the tension. He assessed it all with ER precision. Colleagues? I see. And they are... Julian extended a hand. Julian Albright. Your sister's fiancé. Business associates. We were discussing financial planning with your mother. Robert shook Julian's hand, sat. Financial planning at the old mill on a Tuesday night? With Clara 3 months pregnant? He looked at Clara. How are you feeling? Any complications? I'm fine, Clara said, her voice smaller. Good. Robert picked up the folder. Power of attorney. Interesting. Mom, did you ask for help managing your finances? I did not. He closed the folder. Julian, Clara, gentlemen, a moment alone with my mother? Now wait just a minute. Julian started. Robert's voice cut him off. A surgeon's scalpel. I'm not asking. His authority, honed in the ER, made the lawyers shift. Julian looked to Clara, but she stared at her hands. We'll be right over there, Mr. Albright said, moving toward the bar. Mrs. Vance, don't make hasty decisions. Alone, Robert leaned in. Mom, what's really going on? For the first time, tears threatened. Not sadness, but relief. Knowing one of my children still saw me. They want me to sign over power of attorney. I whispered. Clara says if I don't, I won't see my grandchild. Robert was silent, fingers drumming. How much did they ask you for the wedding? 75,000. He whistled. And you offered 20. More than generous. He glanced at Julian. Mum, are you having any problems? Memory issues? Confusion? I almost laughed. Robert, last month I balanced my checkbook to the penny, renegotiated my car insurance, and caught a property tax error. Does that sound like someone who needs financial management? No, it doesn't. His jaw tightened, a cold fury like Harold's. It sounds like someone who taught her son how to manage money so well he graduated medical school with minimal debt. You worked for that. I worked for it because you taught me the value of work. You showed me how to sacrifice. He looked at Clara. What happened to her, Mom? When did she become this person? It was my own question. For months, years. When had her ambition curdled? Her love become conditional? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe I protected her too much. Or maybe Julian happened to her. I followed his gaze to Julian, animated on his phone, calculating. You think he's behind this? He sees an opportunity. Robert covered my hand. But Clara's 34 and responsible for her choices. What do you want to do about it? Before I could answer, Julian strode back, lawyers trailing. Clara followed, hand on her stomach. Protective or performative, I couldn't tell. Sorry to interrupt, Julian said, not sounding sorry. But we have a timeline. Wedding in 3 months, deposits needed. Of course, I said, rising slowly. Timeline. How thoughtful. I checked my phone. The restaurant hummed, normal lives unaware of the surgical dissection at table 12. I've made my decision, I said, loud enough for everyone. Clara's face froze. I smiled, the same smile I'd perfected over 40 years of marriage. I'll sign, I said. Relief washed over Julian. Mr. Albright smiled. Clara relaxed. But first, I continued, reaching for my phone, someone else wants to say a few words. I found the number I'd added 2 weeks ago. A mother's intuition whispering this dinner was no reconciliation. Brenda, I said. It's Eleanor Vance. Come to the old mill. Bring the documents. Julian's relief morphed into alarm. Who is Brenda? I set the phone down. The room's energy shifted. Lawyers whispered. Clara looked uneasy. Brenda Hayes, I said pleasantly. My attorney? Silence, heavier now. Mr. Albright's predatory smile vanished. Your attorney? Julian repeated. When did you hire an attorney? The same day you started asking my neighbors about my mental state, I replied. Did you really think Mrs. Peterson wouldn't mention a young man asking if I'd been acting strangely? Forgetting things? Clara went pale. Mum, we never... You never what, sweetheart? Never had Julian driving through my neighborhood, taking pictures of my house? Never had him chat with my mailman about my bills? Never had his friend pull comps on my property? My voice remained conversational. Robert leaned back, assembling the pieces. Jesus, Clara, how long have you been planning this? It's not what you think, she insisted, lacking conviction. Isn't it? I pulled a manila envelope from my purse. I think it's exactly what it looks like. A systematic attempt to claim I'm incompetent. I spread the contents. Photos Julian took, emails with a private investigator, inquiries about my medical and banking habits. Brenda has been very thorough. Amazing what people tell an investigator, isn't it? Especially one who looks like someone's sweet grandmother. The youngest lawyer was sweating. Mrs. Vance, a misunderstanding about our client's intentions. Oh, I understand perfectly. I gathered the papers. The question is, did you gentlemen understand what you were being asked to participate in? Brenda arrived, striding with purposeful energy. 70, small, silver-haired, sharp. She'd practiced family law for 30 years. Clara, she said warmly, settling into Robert's procured chair. And this must be your daughter. The contrast was devastating. Isolated moments ago, I was now flanked by strength. Julian and his lawyers were outnumbered by those who understood the law. Gentlemen, Brenda said, assessing them. Documents for Mrs. Vance to sign? Mr. Albright cleared his throat. Family matter, Ms. Hayes. Brenda Hayes of Hayes? Stone and Associates? Quite right. Which is why I'm here to ensure Mrs. Vance's family isn't exploiting her for financial gain. She opened her briefcase, removing a thick folder. Before power of attorney, see what Mrs. Vance has already put in place. The papers were pristine, official county courthouse seal. Julian leaned in, his face shifting from confusion to panic. Irrevocable trust, Brenda explained. Established 2 weeks ago. Mrs. Vance's assets, house, investments, life insurance, all transferred to the Eleanor Vance Family Trust. That's... Julian sputtered. That's what, dear? Brenda asked sweetly. The trust, Clara read over Julian's shoulder. It says the beneficiaries are your children, both born and unborn. I finished. With Robert as the trustee until they reach age 25. The implications hit Julian like a physical blow. He calculated, panicked. But what about the wedding? Our expenses? What about them? Brenda countered. The trust provides for education, medical care, reasonable living. Italian marble doesn't qualify. This is ridiculous, Julian yelled. Clara, tell them. We had an agreement. Did you? Robert asked his sister quietly. Or demands backed by threats? Clara looked around the table. At Julian's anger, at the lawyers distancing themselves, at Robert's disappointment, at Brenda's calm. Her gaze found mine. I'm pregnant, she said, as if that explained everything. We need security. We need to know our child will be provided for. Your child will be provided for, I said gently. Better than you can imagine. Finest education, best medical care, every opportunity a grandparent could give. But Julian won't access a penny. You can't do this. Julian's voice rose. Clara is your daughter. You can't cut her out of your will over a wedding. I'm not cutting her out, I replied. I'm protecting her inheritance from you. Brenda smiled, a smile that had terrified for decades. Mr. Albright, call your attorney. You'll need independent legal advice about your premarital investigation of your fiancé's mother. The threat hung. Julian looked to Mr. Albright, who was gathering papers. I think, Mr. Albright said carefully, we were operating under misunderstandings. Perhaps we postpone any signing until everyone consults counsel. Excellent idea, Brenda agreed. Mrs. Vance, shall we go? You've accomplished what you came here to do. I stood slowly, letting the explosion's dust settle. Clara was crying, silent tears. Grief? Or manipulation? I no longer cared. Clara, I said softly. She looked up, perhaps with hope. When you're ready for a real conversation about this baby, about your future, about what family actually means, call me. But call me alone. I turned to Julian, who stared at the trust documents, willing them to change. As for you, I said, my voice carrying the authority of a woman who had spent 62 years recognizing predators, stay away from my family, stay away from my house. One more inquiry about my competency or finances, and Brenda and I will have a very different conversation about harassment and elder abuse. Robert stood, pulling money for drinks. Clara, he told his sister, you're welcome at my place if you need to think. But come alone and leave the financial scheming at the door. As we walked out, Julian's voice rose behind us, arguing with the lawyers, with Clara, about fairness and rights. The sound faded into the cool evening, absorbed by the universe's vast indifference. How do you feel? Brenda asked on the sidewalk. I considered. My daughter was trying to salvage a relationship with a man who saw her as a pathway to easy money. Julian was learning some women couldn't be intimidated. Free, I said finally. For the first time in months, I feel free. Brenda nodded. Good. Now comes the hard part, deciding what to build with that freedom. What indeed could a woman, 62, newly freed from expectation and betrayal, truly build when her past felt like a ghost and her future an open sea? And how do we begin to write the next chapter of our lives when the last one ended in such a profound, painful shift? The silence of my duplex, usually a comfort, now felt vast, holding the echo of Brenda's words. Now comes the hard part, deciding what you want to build. I woke to the absence of the frantic fight, the tension from the old mill replaced by an unsettling quiet. For weeks, every waking thought had been about defense, about holding my ground. Now, the initial battle won. An unexpected void yawned before me. What indeed could a woman, 62, newly unburdened by expectations and betrayal, truly build when her past felt like a ghost and her future an open sea? My reflection in the hallway mirror showed more than just newly purchased freedom. It showed a woman who felt strangely adrift. The morning sun painted geometric patterns across the linoleum floor Harold and I had installed 23 years ago. The house felt different now. Not empty, but peaceful. A distinction I was only beginning to understand. A quiet hum of possibility. A soft knock at the door broke the stillness. I checked my watch. 9 o'clock sharp. Punctuality. I'd come to appreciate it even more since the old mill, since I'd learned the value of people who said what they meant and did what they promised. Right on time, I murmured, pulling open the door to find Janet Waters holding a covered casserole dish, a knowing smile on her face. Her presence, always a gentle comfort. I brought my grandmother's cornbread, Janet said, settling into the kitchen chair that had become hers over the past weeks. And I heard something interesting at the grocery store yesterday. Janet had appeared in my life like a small miracle, disguised as coincidence. 2 days after the dinner at the old mill, she'd knocked on my door, introducing herself as my new neighbor, a recent widow who'd downsized to the duplex next door. At 67, Janet was trim and energetic, with silver hair she wore in a practical bob, and a direct gaze that suggested she'd seen enough of life to know what truly mattered. More importantly, she had a gift for listening without judgment and a complete immunity to other people's drama. What kind of interesting? I asked, pouring coffee into the mugs we'd picked out together at the antique store downtown. Part of what Janet called my reclaiming project. The chipped ceramic felt solid in my hand. Julian Albright was at the bank yesterday, she said, accepting her mug with the satisfied expression of someone who enjoyed a good story. Apparently, he was quite upset about some accounts being frozen. I sat down across from her, noting how natural this felt, having someone to share coffee with, someone who understood that gossip could be a form of justice when it exposed the right truths to the right people. This quiet exchange, a new normalcy forming. Frozen accounts? I repeated, letting the words settle between us. Janet's eyes sparkled with the particular pleasure that came from watching Karma work with efficient precision. Word is, he might be facing some professional difficulties. I absorbed this with the careful neutrality I'd perfected over the past month. Since the old mill, I'd learned that true retribution was most satisfying when it was served by someone other than yourself, when the universe simply adjusted itself to reflect the natural consequences of poor choices? And how does one truly begin to embrace this new, unscripted chapter when the world keeps delivering reminders of the old? And Clara? I asked, the question hanging between us as we sipped coffee. The quiet hum of the neighborhood filled the comfortable silence. Janet's eyes twinkled. Shopping for wedding dresses at the outlets in Greenville. Italian marble bathroom? Postponed indefinitely. News of Julian's frozen accounts and Clara's shopping spree settled like dust after a storm. Justice, it seemed, was serving itself. Heard from Robert? Janet probed. Yesterday, Clara called him, asking if she was making a mistake. I set down my mug. He told her that was a question only she could answer. Smart man. The phone rang. That familiar tightness in my chest. An unknown local number. Mrs. Vance? A young, nervous voice. Diana Reed from the Elm Community Center. Brenda Hayes mentioned you might be interested in volunteer opportunities. My pulse quickened. Volunteer? For what? What kind of opportunities? I asked, glancing at Janet. We have a program for seniors dealing with financial exploitation, Diana explained. People whose families are trying to take advantage. Brenda thought you'd be uniquely qualified. The irony was stark. My profound betrayal could become a tool for healing. This felt like turning poison into medicine. Tell me more, I said. The words, firm and clear, seemed to resonate beyond the phone line, hinting at a path I hadn't dared imagine. What profound strength does it take to transform your deepest pain into a beacon of hope for others? And could I truly be that woman? For the next 20 minutes, Diana explained the program. Seniors helping seniors, sharing strategies for recognizing manipulation, resources for legal protection, emotional support for those betrayed by people they'd trusted most. It was part support group, part advocacy, part early warning system for a community increasingly targeted by sophisticated scammers, both professional and familial. We meet Tuesday evenings at 7, Diana concluded. Very informal, coffee and conversation mostly, but we've helped quite a few people avoid situations like what Brenda described. I told her I'd think about it, though I was already envisioning myself in that room. A room full of people who understood the particular pain of being seen as a resource rather than a person. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family crisis might become the foundation for helping others navigate similar treacheries. This felt like turning poison into medicine. After I hung up, Janet looked at me, a knowing glint in her eyes. "You're going to do it," she said. It wasn't a question. Probably good. You need something that's yours. Something that has nothing to do with being anyone's mother or potential victim. It was exactly the right thing to say, delivered with the matter-of-fact wisdom that had made Janet such an unexpected gift in my life. She understood transformation not as reinvention, but as a gradual reclaiming of space that had always belonged to you. The afternoon brought another call. This one from Robert. "Mum, I wanted to give you a heads up. Clara's been asking questions about the trust, specifically about whether there are any ways to modify it." My jaw tightened, and I told her that irrevocable means irrevocable, but she seems to think there might be loopholes. She mentioned undue influence, about Brenda pressuring you into decisions you might not have made otherwise. I felt a familiar stirring of anger, but it was different now. Cleaner, more focused, not helpless rage, but the purposeful irritation of someone whose boundaries were being tested. "Let me guess," I said. "Julian's idea, probably. But Mom, she's the one making the calls. She's the one who chose to pursue this. I know." And I did know. Finally and completely. Clara was an adult who'd made adult choices, and those choices had consequences that extended beyond wedding budgets and bathroom renovations. "There's something else," Robert added carefully. "She asked if I thought you'd change your mind if she ended the engagement. What did you tell her?" I told her that decisions motivated by money rarely lead to happiness, but that her relationship with Julian wasn't really my business. He paused. I also told her that if she wanted to repair things with you, it would have to start with an honest conversation about what she'd done and why she'd done it. He sighed, and she hung up on me. I absorbed this information with the same calm acceptance I'd brought to every revelation of the past month. Each piece of evidence that Clara had chosen Julian, chosen money, chosen manipulation over family, simply confirmed what I already knew. My daughter had become someone I didn't recognize, and protecting myself from her choices was not cruelty, but necessity. "Robert," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "whatever happens with Clara, it doesn't change anything between us. You're a good man and a good son, and I'm proud of the life you've built. Mom?" His voice was thick too. "I keep thinking I should be able to fix this somehow. Mediate. Find some middle ground. Some things can't be fixed, sweetheart. Some things can only be accepted." After we hung up, I walked through my house slowly, looking at it with new eyes. The living room where Clara had played with dolls, the kitchen where she'd announced her engagement, the hallway lined with family photos that suddenly seemed like documentation of a story that had ended. But endings, I was learning, were also beginnings. The phone felt heavy in my hand, my fingers hovering over Diana's number. Could I truly step into this new beginning? Not just for myself, but to guide others through the darkness I'd just escaped. And what does it take to turn personal trauma into collective triumph? I took a deep breath, the phone cool in my hand, and pressed Diana Reed's number. My call was brief, purposeful. I told her I was in, ready to volunteer for the seniors program. A quiet certainty settled over me. Tomorrow I would step into a new identity, one not defined by my past hurts, but by a future of helping others. 3 weeks after that call, I found myself in the bright, spacious main hall of the Elm Community Center. 12 women and 3 men were arranging folding chairs in a circle. Maxine Makowski, 72, moved with a purposeful energy, a testament to her retirement years spent overcoming challenges. Rosa Pratt Kelly, barely 60, but carrying the exhaustion of years battling her son's gambling addiction, carefully placed tissues on the small table. A practical gesture acknowledging the tears that often accompanied our Tuesday evening meetings. "Clara's here early tonight?" Janet murmured, settling into the chair beside mine. She'd started attending 3 weeks after me, claiming curiosity about financial exploitation. But I knew she was there to support me. Janet had a gift for making altruism seem like simple interest. I followed her gaze to a new woman, perhaps 55, clutching her purse like a shield, her perfectly styled hair contrasting with the stress etched in her posture. "First time," I said, recognizing that shell-shocked dignity. "I'll talk to her after." The past weeks had taught me there were countless ways families twisted love into theft. I'd heard stories making Julian and Clara's demands seem almost quaint. Children forging signatures, grandchildren using credit cards, spouses draining accounts. Yet I'd also witnessed incredible recoveries, proving human resilience. Brenda had become a legend in our group, helping 17 people establish trusts and prosecuting 2 elder abuse cases. "Good evening, everyone," I said, calling the meeting to order, finding a natural authority in my voice. "For our newcomers, I'm Eleanor Vance, and this is our weekly gathering for people who've experienced financial exploitation by family members." The words still carried a sting, but it was the clean pain of a healing wound, not the agony of fresh betrayal. I'd learned to own my story, to tell it without shame, to use it as a tool for others. Tonight, we'd talk about what comes after. After protection, after boundaries, after stopping the threat, what comes next? When the wounds have just begun to close, and the path ahead remains unwritten. Tonight, what comes next? I asked the circle. The real work began after protection. My purpose, once wife and mother, now bloomed in helping others. What future do we forge when our past defines our purpose in unexpected ways? The immediate aftermath of the old mill had been about damage control and legal protection, But the real work, I was discovering, was quieter, more personal. It was about learning to trust my own judgment again, rebuilding relationships that mattered, and discovering who I was when I wasn't defending myself against attack. For me, said Eddie Chase, a 78-year-old former teacher whose daughter had systematically drained her retirement account, what came next was realizing I could live alone and like it. Nods rippled around the circle. Independence was a common theme in our group, not the fierce isolation that came from being hurt, but the satisfied solitude of choosing your own company over toxic relationships. I learned I didn't have to forgive anyone, added Sheila Phelps, whose son had stolen her identity to open credit cards. That was big for me. Everyone kept saying I had to forgive him because he was family. But Dr. Vance helped me understand that forgiveness isn't mandatory for healing. Robert had indeed become an unofficial counselor to our group, stopping by once a month to discuss the psychological aspects of family financial abuse. His insights had helped me understand that my guilt over Clara wasn't maternal failure. It was a normal response to an abnormal situation. "What about you, Eleanor?" asked Carolyn Franklin, the newest regular in our group, her voice gentle. "What came after for you?" I considered the question, looking around the circle at faces that had become familiar, dear even. These people had seen me cry, rage, doubt myself, and gradually find my footing again. They'd earned an honest answer. "Purpose," I said finally. "For 40 years, my purpose was being a wife and mother. After Harold passed, I thought my purpose was protecting what we'd built so I could pass it on to my children. But what came after was discovering that my real purpose might be protecting other people's mothers from what I went through." It was true. The volunteer work had evolved into something larger, a consulting practice where I helped other women navigate family financial crises. Brenda had referred several clients to me, and I discovered I had a talent for spotting manipulation tactics and helping people develop strategies for resistance. "How do you handle the sadness?" asked the new woman, speaking for the first time. Her voice was soft, cultured, carrying the particular sadness of someone whose worldview had been fundamentally altered. "How do you stop missing who they used to be?" The question hit the center of something I'd been avoiding, because the truth was, I did miss Clara. Not the manipulative woman she'd become, but the little girl who'd brought me dandelions, the teenager who'd called for advice about boys, the young woman genuinely proud of her parents' marriage. "I don't think you stop missing them," I admitted, my gaze sweeping the circle. "I think you learn to mourn them while protecting yourself from them. It's possible to grieve someone who's still alive." The meeting continued for another hour, covering practical matters, new legal resources, upcoming workshops, success stories from former members who'd reclaimed their lives. But that question about missing them lingered, following me home to the duplex. Janet was waiting with leftover soup, already settled into her chair at my kitchen table, a silent understanding passing between us. "How was group?" she asked. "Good? Hard?" A new woman asked about missing the people our families used to be. I replied. Janet nodded slowly. At 67, she'd survived her own children's attempts to pressure her into selling her house and moving into assisted living, not because she needed care, but because they wanted access to her equity. Her solution had been to move into the duplex next to mine and inform them that their inheritance was now being spent on her happiness. "Speaking of missing people," she said carefully, "Robert called. Clara had her baby." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them for weeks. "A granddaughter," Robert had told me earlier, due in late October, according to his calculations from Clara's earlier pregnancy announcements. "How is she?" I asked, though I wasn't sure if I meant Clara or the baby. "Everyone's healthy. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. They named her Eleanor. Eleanor. My mother's name." The manipulation was so transparent, so calculated, that I felt momentarily dizzy with the audacity of it. "Robert said Clara asked him to call you," Janet continued. She wanted you to know that visiting hours are flexible and that she'd very much like to see you. I sat quietly, feeling the pull of grandmotherly instinct warring with the hard-won wisdom of the past 6 months. Part of me wanted to rush to the hospital, to hold this new person who shared my DNA, to forgive everything for the chance to be part of her life. But I'd learned to distrust my immediate emotional responses, to examine them for signs of manipulation, both external and internal. "What do you think she wants?" I asked. "I think she wants to use that baby to reopen negotiations about the trust." It was probably true. In the months since the old mill, Clara had made several indirect approaches, messages through Robert, cards on my birthday, carefully orchestrated encounters at places she knew I frequented. Each contact had carried the subtle suggestion that reconciliation was possible if I was willing to be reasonable about certain financial arrangements. "The baby isn't responsible for her parents' choices," I said, more to myself than to Janet. "No, she's not. But you're not responsible for protecting yourself from her parents' choices either." Janet's words were a quiet anchor. The next morning, I called Brenda. "I've been expecting this call," she said, without preamble. "Clara had the baby." "She did. And now I have to decide what comes next." "What do you want to come next?" Brenda's question cut through the noise, echoing the one I'd been asking myself since Janet delivered the news. What did I want? Not what Clara wanted. Not what Robert thought was best. Not what society expected of grandmothers. What did I actually want? "I want to meet my granddaughter," I said slowly. "But I want to do it on my terms, with clear boundaries, and without opening myself up to manipulation." "That's possible," Brenda said. "We can arrange supervised visits through Robert. We can establish clear protocols about what topics are off limits, what behaviors will end visits, what consequences will follow if those boundaries are violated. And if Clara refuses those terms, then you'll know exactly where you stand with her. And more importantly, you'll know you protected yourself while leaving the door open for a genuine relationship if she ever chooses to walk through it." This was it, the moment of truth, where learned wisdom met deepest desire. Could I truly face my daughter again, with new boundaries and a new strength? And what does it mean to offer love without sacrificing your own peace? That afternoon, I drafted a letter to my daughter, not the angry tirade I'd rehearsed, but a calm statement of boundaries and possibilities. My pen glided across the page, each word a deliberate choice, reflecting the clear mind Brenda's questions had given me. "Clara," it began, "I would very much like to meet Eleanor and to have a relationship with her as she grows. However, any contact between us must respect the boundaries I've established for my own well-being." The ink dried, a testament to a shift within me, from reactive defense to proactive peace. "I am willing to visit with Eleanor in Robert's presence for limited periods, with the understanding that any attempt to discuss the trust, my financial decisions, or past grievances will end the visit immediately." My finger traced the firm lines. "If you can accept these terms, please have Robert arrange our first meeting. If you cannot, I hope you'll reconsider when you're ready to prioritize Eleanor's relationship with her grandmother over your relationship with my money." A slight pause then. "I will always love the daughter you were. I am no longer available to be victimized by the person you've chosen to become. With hope for your growth and boundaries for my protection, Mom." I sealed the envelope, the crisp paper cool against my palm before I could second-guess myself. Then I walked to the mailbox, the worn path beneath my feet suddenly feeling like a triumphant march. The sun was warm on my face, the air crisp with autumn's promise. Each step was lighter, shedding the weight of unspoken expectations and unaddressed hurts. The future, once a looming question mark, now stretched ahead of me like an uncharted road. And for the first time in years, I was genuinely curious about where it might lead. There would be other dinners, other conversations, other opportunities to choose dignity over desperation, wisdom over wishful thinking. The burgundy dress still hung in my closet, But I was already imagining other clothes, other occasions, other versions of myself I had yet to discover. The woman who'd walked into the old mill 6 months ago had been someone's victim. The woman who'd walked out and now mailed this letter was something much more dangerous to people like Julian Albright. She was someone who could not be moved. And as you reflect on Eleanor's journey, what does it truly mean to find your unshakable strength in the face of betrayal? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters more than you know. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more tales of resilience and unexpected